This program is brought to you by Rogers Xfinity, connecting you to more of what you love. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
RTV Sports Rap continuing on as the weather rolls in. Last week was nice here in Gray County. Wasn't great as of this week so far, and I know rain is coming, so that is just making everyone feel also warm inside after May 2-4 long weekend. Spencer Byers alongside me is JC Coots, Mark McKelvey, and Manny Pava. And guys, with the summer weather coming in, it means playoffs continue on, and the Mem Cup is on its way later this week with it going down in Rimouski, as well as obviously Moncton, who are the champions of the QMJHL, as well as Medicine Hat, right now the reigning champs of the WHL, and of course the London Knights, reigning champs in the OHL. Now, I've kind of held the opinion most of the playoffs and maybe even most of the season that London is probably the favorite for the championship, as they were the finalists last year, losing to host Saginaw. Mark McKelvey, how far off base am I saying London are probably the favorite and maybe the team to win it?
Well, it's not too often that you get teams going to back-to-back Memorial Cups. I know London's been in what essentially you'd almost call a dynasty for the last 2 decades, but they have so many guys back, and that's the reason why they pretty much just ran through the OHL playoffs. Only one blemish, just that loss in Game 1 of the OHL Championship Series, 16-1, and with a team that boasts over a dozen players that are drafted to the NHL and a lot of guys who have a bitter taste in their mouth from last year's loss in the championship game. I think it's fair to say that they are the favorite. It's so hard to compare these teams until you get to the Memorial Cup. What I found very interesting, and I know we often like to talk about the CHL top 10 rankings, and usually we like to poke holes in it, but at the end of the season, the top 4 teams in the CHL top 10 are the 4 teams that have made it to the Memorial Cup. So maybe this, based on that, you could say might be the most even tournament, but that said, I don't know. When I watch the London Knights go through the playoffs, this is a team that just is a juggernaut, and I don't think they can be stopped.
It's going to be tough. Obviously, the Medicine Hat Tigers have Gavin McKenna, who everyone's been talking about, had over 2 points per game during the playoffs and the regular season this year in the WHL. Manny, do you see any of the other teams being a real test for London in the Mem Cup?
I don't see it. There might be a couple close games, but as Mark mentioned, this London team is made for this. And I think their loss in the Memorial Cup final in Saginaw last year has invigorated them throughout the course of this year and will really help propel them over the top. Not only did Mark mention over a dozen NHL picks, but a lot of those picks are high draft picks from Cowan to Dickinson to Bonk. So there is a lot of talent. I really like the storylines in this year's Memorial Cup, though. You have Gavin McKenna, who's arguably the top prospect in North America, not even eligible for this year's NHL draft. He's looking to next year, playing with Medicine Hat. And then you have Rimouski and Moncton, who faced off in the Q final and went to 6 games. They're going to battle again in this year's Memorial Cup. So I think the storylines with London trying to get back to the final for the 2nd year in a row, just really good storylines for the Memorial Cup this year.
And JC, with that, obviously the hosts are reigning champs right now in Saginaw. Obviously, they didn't make it again, couldn't get out of the first round in the OHL playoffs due to goaltending. Do you see Rimouski as a team to beat just because they're at home like Saginaw were, who did test London last year in the OHL playoffs and then beat them in the final of the Memorial Cup? Or do you see it as a London Knights win, as something they've been looking at for over a year now since the loss to Saginaw?
First of all, Spencer, you're lucky Adrian's not here to school you on that pronunciation of Rimouski. But I will give Rimouski some credit. I mean, they could potentially get there. I mean, you come down to 1-game playoffs, and last year Saginaw showed you what they can do with a 1-game playoff. Rimouski, the Oceanic, are fairly legit. Their goaltender, Matthias Langevin, he ended up with 12 wins throughout the playoffs, which is the most of any goaltender, and he had 3 shutouts, also leading the queue in the postseason. His numbers were fairly impressive. They got a really good team in Rimouski, so it did look like they were up against a powerhouse, though, in Moncton, and I will give some credit to the Wildcats. In my old stomping ground of Moncton, I lived out there for a few months doing radio. I got to go to games in the old Moncton Coliseum before they got the new building. They look very good. Caleb Desnoyers has had a fantastic playoffs with 30 points throughout the playoffs for the Wildcats, and their goaltending has been good all year. Detroit Red Wings pick Rudy Guimont has a shutout in the playoffs. He was tremendous throughout the regular season. His numbers pale a little bit in the playoffs, but still, in some incredible goaltending in Moncton. Will they be enough, though, to be the answer to the London Knights? I don't think so. We've all said it already on this show that they are a powerhouse. Nobody compared Medicine Hat or Moncton or Rimouski to being an AHL team this season. That is simply London. They are just loaded with talent. They're designed for one thing and one thing only, and it's to win the Memorial Cup and win the OHL. They've already got one done. They're probably going to finish that next goal. But Manny mentioned storylines. I love the fact that over in Moncton, they have a brand new coach, Gardner McDougall. It was his first season coaching in the queue, and he ends up winning it all with the Wildcats, and his son is the general manager of the team. So another really cool storyline, another family connection in Major Junior.
All that guy does is win. It's like 9 straight league titles or something, going from the U Sports, and then he's won a Memorial Cup before he'd ever even coached a full season in the CHL when he came in as an interim coach for the host team out east a few years ago. I mean, I guess we probably shouldn't be betting against them, should we? That's, I guess, what we're thinking. London is that good that they're going to stop the almighty Gardner McDougall. But the guys, 16-1 for London, 16-2 for Medicine Hat, 16-3 for Moncton. The best teams got there, and I would love to see upsets and Cinderella stories in junior hockey. I think we all do. This just wasn't the year for it.
It just wasn't the year for any team that wasn't maybe stacked or had all of the draft picks, all of the talent, and had Gavin McKenna, who is going to be, as Manny mentioned, a generational player as of likely, and right now has been projected to be the first overall pick in next year's draft for the last, 3 years since he got drafted in Medicine Hat as an exceptional player. So
DSN's got to love it, right? It's going to be the Gavin McKenna show and the London Knights show and the Gardner McDougall show, right? Like
he's giving great games.
Yeah.
You're
Manny,
right there,
he'll
man.
probably be going to Gavin McKenna games though next season, right?
If he goes to Michigan, I love that the Dub is pumping up their league though, trying to keep
They're
them, trying to keep him booking exhibition games in his hometown for next season. Oh, the push is on.
Well, and I'm interested to see how many guys do try to go to the NCAA a little early to be able to keep themselves maybe out of the NHL and try to keep themselves on a different development path for what NCAA players do versus what CHL players do. I am interested in that. I don't think McKenna will go, obviously, to Michigan, as you guys mentioned, but obviously that's still a possibility, and I know there's been some talk of that being possible, him getting out of Medicine Hat. So with that being said, the NHL playoffs continue. The Final Four are set. Carolina and Florida in the East. And then in the West, of course, is Dallas and Edmonton. So a Canadian team still has a chance of winning the Stanley Cup if that has been your goal throughout these playoffs as a Canadian winner of the Cup. But Mark McKelvey, the Leafs are out. 6-1 in Game 7 at home against Florida. Not necessarily that they lost. Sometimes it's the way you lose, and definitely not the result that anyone would have wanted in Toronto, Mark. So I guess what's your autopsy been the last couple of days, kind of trying to dissect what happened throughout this playoff, and then obviously coming up into the summer with Mitch Marner and John Tavares both being unrestricted free agents?
Are you sure you don't want to ask another Memorial Cup question?
No, Mark. I think we've had enough of junior hockey talk. I think we spent a good amount of time on it. I think it's time for the autopsy.
I mean, I could keep talking about the Medicine Hat Tigers if everybody would like that, but I don't know. How do I feel? You're just numb to this because it happens every year. Second round, losing in Game 7 to the defending Cup champions. If you said that going in and said you're going to go to 7 with the Panthers, who very, very much could get back to the Stanley Cup final again, and I think they will. I think they'll beat Carolina. You might take it, but it's not about the fact that you might lose to the team that goes on to win the cup again. It's how they lost. I mean, just games 5 and 7 being kind of identical in the sense of you lay just an egg. One thing for that to happen in game 5 when it wasn't do or die, and you showed some heart and you were able to dig and you were able to gut one out in game 6, but to have that happen again in game 7, I'm not one of those people who just says the sky is falling and blow everything up, but eventually there's got to be something, and it's got to be somebody out of that core group. And at the end of the day, it doesn't look like it's going to be because they traded him. It's going to be because he's going to walk away, and that's Mitch Marner. And I'm sitting here not too disappointed that Mitch Marner is going to leave. It's not because Mitch Marner isn't a tremendous player. He had over 100 points this year. He's one of the best in the league, but something's got to change from that group. And it's unfortunate that it got to this point. There was a video that came online today of the post game right after they've been eliminated in each of the last almost 9 years. And the comments, they're all the same. This team just never learned, and they have not been able to change. And it's not a case of them being young anymore. Their decor was very veteran. They're one of the oldest teams in the league. They don't have that fight in them. And the one quote that I'll leave you guys on was William Nylander being asked the day of the game how he was feeling. Essentially, I'm essentially I don't want to misquote him here, but basically what he said was just another game. You approach it just like another game. Well, maybe that's the problem. Maybe you can't approach it like just another game. It's game 7 in the playoffs. You have got to want this, and we knew which team wanted it more. It was the Florida Panthers.
Just as the Bruins have, just as how many other teams you can say the Tampa Bay Lightning have in the past against the Leafs. It seems like everybody does, Mark, and maybe that's kind of the bigger issue. Now, obviously, you mentioned it that Marner is obviously going to be a UFA. He has openly said that he's winning and seeing on how he feels in the offer he gets fielded by the Toronto Maple Leafs. John Tavares has made it clear in his exit postseason interview that he would like to return to the Leafs. Obviously, it would be at a lesser number than his $11 million it was previous, but still, it'd be a pretty penny for John Tavares. I'll go now to you, JC Coots. Do you see both Tavares and Marner walking? Do you see them bringing back one of the two? Do you see them getting both back going into free agency?
I mean, I think for the Leafs to maybe say goodbye to both would probably be the best. But Tavares yesterday, when he was walking out of the locker room day availability, said that he's already talked to Tree Living and the coach, and they seem to think that he's coming back. So that is something to keep Tavares, because that is a good veteran voice in the room. And he did have some pretty good moments in the playoffs where he did step up and he was a factor in the games. So maybe that is a good guy to keep around. I will, though, if we're fully dissecting this, here's the date which should live in infamy for the Leafs, and that's August 14th, 2024. That's the day that they convinced Tavares to take the C off his jersey and hand it to Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews, pretty much in his post-game comments, confirmed that he is not a leader. When he's saying that there's passengers on the team, when he's saying that the other team wanted it more than us, well, no, you're the guy that's supposed to step up and be the difference. You're supposed to get people fired up in the room. That's why you're the captain. I mean, if we go around and compare captains in the National Hockey League, whether or not they have the success of raising the Stanley Cup or not, nobody talks like that. He's not a leader, and I've been on that train. I was scratching my head the second they did it, but I understand why they did it. It's because he's their best player. He put up almost 70 goals last year. So you don't have to give the C to your best player. That's not the rule. You give it to the best guy that motivates the team. So I think that's a big problem. But how are you going to move that guy? How are you going to move a $13.5 million contract? I think they're stuck with them. They tied himself to this anchor, and they're stuck now. And they're going to lose Mitch Marner, who may pull a Nazem Kadri and go off and be super successful with another team and help someone else win a Stanley Cup. But that ship has sailed now. That game is over. So the Leafs are going to have to figure out the leadership issue. I think they've got the coaching. I like Berube. I like what he's done. Shanahan's got to go, I'm afraid to say. Like, you've tied yourself to this core four now for 9 years. And what have you got to show for it? 2 second-round wins. You know who has more playoff victories in the last 20 years than the Leafs do? The Buffalo Sabres, who haven't made the playoffs in 14 years now, consecutively. So there's a lot of issues in Leafland, and they're going to have to make some ugly decisions. One of the big questions was, is the media the problem? Is there too much pressure in this market? I think the media and the fan base is part of the problem, that you keep pushing dumb ideas like make Matthews the captain. Stop listening to those voices and go with your hockey knowledge. Brendan Shanahan should have known this, being on a dynasty in Detroit. He knows what kind of characters and talent it takes to win. He knows what the team needs, and he never built that. He just built around 4 guys that the fan base liked.
And not just that, again, Marner's walking, Tavares is walking. You're now losing 2 guys, if they don't resign either, that collectively made over $20 million collectively. And with that, they're a big bulk of the offense. They were obviously two members of the core 4, as you mentioned. But also, with that being said, how do you replace those guys? And that's kind of even the bigger question. How do you replace a guy like Mitch Marner, who had, how many 90-point seasons? How do you replace a John Tavares as a second or third line center, or if he now plays the wing because of his face-off taking not being up to scratch anymore? How do you replace those guys with just the money, not getting the assets back that they could have if they had traded Marner before his no movement clause kicked in 2 years ago, or if Marner waived his no trade clause, which we all knew he wasn't going to do, because why would you get a no trade clause if you plan on waiving your no trade clause, and which completely within his contractual right. And Tavares, I believe, had a full no move anyway, so he wasn't going nowhere even if you wanted to deal him in the last year or two of the $11 million deal. You signed him as a free agent from the Islanders. So many. What do you kind of make of the ending of the Leafs season with all the question marks going into the offseason?
I have to laugh. But I feel sorry for Mark McKelvey and the Leafs fans. Like, after a decade, like, this is awful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's terrible. Like, we're all fans on this panel. We all support a certain team. To have hope. It's not even to get close, because they haven't been close. They're still 9 wins away from winning the Stanley Cup. But to have hope and just to have it crushed year after year after year, I feel bad for these guys. Like, you all make great points about what to do with this team. Like, you know what? Tavares leaving Toronto is not a fait accompli. Like, you could sign him to a hometown discount at $4 million a year, right? For 3 years. He scored 38 goals this year, guys.
Mm-hmm.
He can be your third line center, and the money you save from Marner, because yes, he's gone, you can try to find that 2C if you can convince Sam Bennett to come to your team if he doesn't re-sign with Florida. But I'll throw this out there for you guys. Why don't you just blow up everybody? Like Morgan Riley. I know he's got a no trade clause, but maybe he wants out of Toronto because of the pressure that JC talked about. What about Austin Matthews? He's only got 3 more years on his deal. He's got a no trade, but send him to Utah. He's from Utah. Or he's from Arizona, excuse me, the former Coyotes team. Send him to Utah. Send him to Anaheim. Really blow up this team and start from scratch. Because you know what? Everybody's talking about the Leafs and how you have to blow it up. Careful what you wish for. You just won the division, and you're going to lose some pretty big pieces that may not get you to the top of the mountain again in the regular season in a very competitive conference. Ottawa's coming up. Montreal's coming up. The Red Wings are on the brink. Boston's going to get better. You still have Tampa Bay and Florida. So careful what you wish for, Leaf fans.
I'll say this, a lot of teams have to rely on young players to be impact performers. Look at the Dallas Stars, for example, and the guys that they had their core. They're all the old guys right now, but it's the young guys that have come in and have really carried the load and become the stars and become the guys that are putting up the points. For the Leafs, the biggest impact player over the last few years, when you talk about prospects who has come in, is Matthew Nyes. He looks like he's going to be an absolute stud. I don't think there's one Leaf fan who would even consider even the idea of him not being part of this long term. And hopefully they can get it done as he's an RFA and they'll figure something out. But you're right, Manny. Maybe it is something else there. Maybe you can keep a couple of those veteran core pieces, but the team's got to grow, and it's not going to grow. I love Easton Cowan. He's a great player. I still have question marks about where he comes in and how he can become a top line NHL player. Ben Danford, that's who they took with their first round pick. He's a real solid defenseman in the OHL. What's his ceiling, though, at the NHL level? I just don't know if the pipeline is there. They trade away a lot of their top picks anyways because they've been trying to go for it each and every year. But maybe Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, at the end of the day, you get into the playoffs, you get one round, you get 2 rounds. I know there's probably going to be pressure on Brendan Shanahan, and maybe by the time this airs, there could be rumblings that he's no longer part of this. But at the same time, can they live with 2 rounds? Like, is there really that pressure internally there for them to go all the way? Or is it every year you're guaranteed playoffs? Maybe they can live with it.
And guaranteed money, Mark McKelvey. I think that's an even bigger question. Is we know the ticket revenue they make, we know the fans that sit out front of Maple Leaf Square to watch games. Like it is ridiculous. They'll always the money factory in Toronto to be a part of the Leafs organization. So is that enough? That's a great question. Internally, is it enough to just make it to the second round? Is it enough to make it to Game 7 of the first round every other year and get your 3 or 4 home games and make your and make your ticket revenue and make your TV revenue? That's a great point, and I think it's an interesting one. And again, losing Tavares and or Marner are both massive losses in their own right. And then who replaces those chasm of player? Because that's a first line and second line player that you're losing for nothing. And yes, you're retaining the money you had in them, but does that mean you can sign a player for that money of that caliber in free agency in this market when you're signing Austin Matthews to 13.5 and the contracts continue to go up? It's going to be interesting to see how the Leafs navigate it, and if it's with or without Brandon Shanahan. Is Brad Treliving up to hockey ops and they get a new GM? How do they restructure that? All of that's interesting. Now let's talk about the teams that are still in. Carolina, Florida. You've also got Edmonton and Dallas. I'll start with you, JC Coots. Out of those 4 teams, who do you make it in the final? Who do you see hoisting Lord Stanley's Cup?
Well, the Eastern Conference Series is likely to be over fairly quick. Maybe Carolina can win a game or 2, but based on the type of play we saw from Florida, the fact that Bobrovsky finally found his game, I think he allowed 4 goals in the last 4 games in that series. Like he finally figured things out, and you love to see that from a Panthers perspective because you need to have the goaltending if you're going to get all the way to the big dance. So Bobrovsky seems like he's sound right now. The rest of the team, though, they did what they do best, and that is play a form of shutdown hockey when they need to. I mean, of all of the series in that second round, I would say the Toronto-Florida series was the one where if you got the puck on your stick, you had no time to make a decision because one team or the other was coming to take it away from you. That was probably the most competitive series in terms of puck possession of the second round series. So Florida moving that ahead against Carolina, a team that's kind of had it easy, I almost want to say, to get to the conference finals. I don't think that they necessarily compare. And of the pieces that Florida added, I mean, Brad Marchand is their leading scorer through the playoffs. I mean, how big of a acquisition was that? And he's doing what Marchand does best. He's being a pest in the playoffs. So Florida, again, defending champs. They showed you in Game 7 exactly what mentality they have built up, what they've learned, their experience from going all the way and winning last year in a 7-game series. That's going to be too much for Carolina to handle. In the West, Edmonton has come on quite a bit. They are looking much better. Even Skinner's looking better right now. But that's going to be the big question mark, is the goaltending, because you've got the shaky Edmonton goaltending versus Jake Ottinger, who's been very, very good through the playoffs. That is going to be probably the determining factor in this series. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be 6 or 7. The Canadian fan in me who would love to see a Florida-Edmonton rematch obviously is going to pick the Oilers for this series, but they have been much better. Those question marks, what we were worried about the Oilers going into the playoffs, is McDavid and Draisaitl healthy? Can they carry the load? Will the secondary scoring be able to step up? Guys like Evander Kane, even Corey Perry have stepped up. So all of a sudden, those question marks seem to have been answered for the better, and the Oilers all of a sudden look a lot better now than they did before the playoffs even started.
Manny, who do you see as the combatants for the Lord Stanley's Cup as we continue on in the NHL playoffs?
I had Dallas and Florida at the beginning of the playoffs, so I got to stick with them, right? Like, I'd love to see Edmonton make it, being all Canadian and the last Canadian team left in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I think Ottinger's the better goaltender. And the one thing that stands out for me, um, Edmonton's gotten this far with depth scoring. I think they have 16 goals from players not named McDavid and Draisaitl. That's unbelievable, really, if you think about it. But that also scares me because it means Draisaitl and McDavid may score in bunches here. I just like Dallas a lot. I think the Carolina series with Florida will be a little bit tighter. Freddie Anderson is being talked about for a Conn Smythe. He's played that well. So I think Carolina will give Florida a bit of a battle, but I like Florida. Interesting stat. Saw the Panthers gave up 4 goals in the final 4 games against Washington, or in the games that they beat Washington. Washington only scored 4 goals in those 4 games. The Panthers only allowed 4 goals in the last 4 games against the Maple Leafs. So I might be taking the under in every single game in that series, fellas.
What about you, Mark McKelvey? Who do you see being the combatants for the Stanley Cup?
I got Dallas and Florida as well. I think when you talk about the fact that the Edmonton Oilers are maybe starting to round the corner and find their game, trust me, I didn't have them knocking out Vegas in 5 games the way they did. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's just a lot of ups and downs there. And I think this Dallas team is just built different. And this is a team similar to what I talk about teams that are on a mission. I don't see them stopped. And for the Florida Panthers, do you think the 7-game series at least took any bite out of them? Probably not as much as it should have. So I'll stick with Florida to come through against Carolina, who at the end of the day, I guess as long as Edmonton doesn't advance, Gary Bettman's going to be thrilled with what the final is going to look like.
Well, you mentioned Conn Smythe winners, guys. Mikko Rantanen's got 19 points, 9 goals in the playoffs so far. He's been one of the best performers for Dallas. And obviously, being a former Avalanche member, he's looking to win another Stanley Cup, but this time for a different Central team member. So with that, we will quickly go to the NBA, and I'll start with you, Manny Pava. OKC versus the Minnesota Timberwolves in the West Final. The Knicks versus the Indiana Pacers in the East Final. Who do you see fighting for the Larry O'Brien Trophy?
Well, I wore my Canadian basketball sweater today in honor of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think OKC makes it to the final, and SGA is going to lead the Thunder to the final. The East is a little bit more interesting. No Spike Lee and Reggie Miller to battle it out between the Pacers and the Knicks circa the 90s, but I think this is going to be an outstanding series. I know everybody's on the Knicks bandwagon, but I'm going to pick the Pacers in this one, fellas.
Give me Indiana. Benedict Mathurin and Andrew Nembhard, both Canadian. I'll go over you now to you, JC. Who do you like in the 2 conference finals to fight for the NBA championship?
I think that these could both be pretty amazing series. Like, these could both be 7-game series based on what these teams have done. I mean, for the Timberwolves, they've played 10 playoff games and had an upset in reality and an upset on paper, beating out the Lakers and the Nuggets. As for Oklahoma, I mean, I think we all picked Oklahoma, or most of us did on this panel before the season or before the playoffs even started, to be in the final. I think the Thunder probably have the edge in that series. As for the other side of the coin, again, the Knicks, they've played well and overcame a top-seeded Boston team that a lot of people thought were going to get there. They've looked really good, but the Pacers have an incredible amount of talent, and they're very good on both sides of the ball. So I'd have to give the edge to the Pacers, but again, I think both these series maybe go 6 or 7.
Well, Mark McKelvey, I know what your answer would be. It'd be OKC, because everyone's on the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander train.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
Hola.
That thing doesn't understand a word you're...
Shh. We're talking. In this world, you never know what you'll find. Chicken jockey!